Yeah, so my thought is, let's look at Maker and Liquidity. So Maker mints a CDP of like, let's say like 200%. You get some DAI. This DAI is backed. But then the problem is what happens when DAI sells for less than $1 in the market. The Maker does not have like a direct redemption way, so you can't like take a DAI and go redeem it for $1.
Is
Sorry.
in and out for people, or is it just me? You going in and out for people, or is it just me?
Oh,
Sounds
I'm
fine
not
to me.
sure.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you catch me up, Matt? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I was saying Maker, they mint DAI. DAI is backed by ETH or whatever collateral there is. But the problem is what happens if the price of DAI sells less than $1 in the market. People also correct me if I'm misunderstanding any of these protocols. So DAI or Maker has no direct redemption. You can't like take DAI and go redeem it for ETH. And what they did to maintain peg is they created this PSM, peg stability model or module. And this is the way that it works is that they have USDC in it, and then you are actually able to redeem or they swap DAI when it's below 1 for USDC to maintain peg. That's the way they use it, or that's the way they're able to maintain redeemability, basically, given that there is no way to redeem it. Liquidity, because Liquidity does not have this like centralized thing where it can be like 1-for-1. What they do is that they have this redemption form. So you take 1 LUSD and then you can always redeem it for ETH. But then it introduced this big problem of, I am someone who take out a loan. My loan should not be liquidated, but now it's getting effectively liquidated because it's getting redeemed. And that's like terrible, but they can only do this because they have to maintain this in a CDP way. Just looking at both of ways, there is no way to really enforce redemption unless you have to make it like in a bad way. Maker went away with it by basically just using USDC and be like, this is how we're going to defend peg. And Liquidity's way through redemption just makes it a terrible user experience, which I don't know. This is why they went with V2, and in V2 they're trying to introduce interest rates, but I still feel like effectively it's still terrible compared to the other things. So I'm just thinking about it here. CDPs inherently suffer from the problem of you can't really back the dollar or the synthetic dollar that they're creating. It sure is backed by $1, but you can't redeem it. And if you want to redeem it, you have to introduce some bad forms or ways to do it. The way that Maker did it is just basically centralize it and let's just hold $1, an actual dollar, and redeem it. The day Liquidity did it is again like terrible for you as a user for you to use it. So I just like thinking out loud here that CDPs are not really good as well. So even though the dollar is backed, it doesn't really mean that it's equal $1, and you have to go through like terrible shortcuts to make it work.
I think this is tremendous insight. In particular, the lack of redeemability, which is sort of like the centralized, collateralized stable coins that are now like treasury based, do have that redeemability. And if you want instantaneous redeemability, you may take some spread on that, but it's still pretty good. Versus, I think you're highlighting something really interesting about these CDPs, which is they really don't offer true redeemability. Now, they used to, in a sense, like Maker used to have a slightly different system. They started with auctions, and they've evolved to this. But I think the point is that throughout this, there's never really, in the instance where you introduce instantaneous redeemability for some, it sort of comes at the cost of the ability to redeem at par for others, potentially. So it's an interesting trade-off space.
Yeah, and you have Go, I think, which is Aave. They were depegged for some time because they didn't have this redeemability module similar to DAI. And I think they introduced it eventually, or they did something like that. But for a long period, they were also depegged because of that,
Yeah, I think this is super interesting. It makes you think, what's next?
I think just coming to the conclusion that these things are... I thought it was interesting. They were saying that Liquidity V1 worked at low interest rate environments, but it doesn't work now when the environment is like different. Basically, like the risk-free rate is like higher. And I think it was interesting. It's that we look at these models, we look at these systems, and we be like, it's perfect, it's stable, it's like unbreakable or whatever it is. But that's not true. It's just the case right now. and we keep on seeing it and seeing it, and I think we'll see the CDP's model as well, and in the future, clearly our bet is that they won't be able to scale, and like other conditions in it. So it's like the same. I don't really think that these systems are perfect in a way or another. They just seem great right now, but they're pretty fragile.
You're gonna say something, Brian? I think you true place where you can CDPs as a way to create like a low volatility asset, totally non-competitive with credit. But there's still sort of a fundamental question here, which is how do you liquidate loans, which is in and of itself a very interesting topic.
Yes, there is no guarantee as well that these systems are actually able even to honor the collateral, let's say, that is backing it. It has worked so far in this like tough environments, but on paper, by mathematically speaking, they should collapse. They shouldn't be able to work. If they grow too big, whatever collateral is backing them, there is no guarantee that it will actually give you the dollar that you think it should give you. It's worked so far. It doesn't mean it will keep working. If anything, we can see it as well with all pegged currencies before. All currencies that used to like honor a certain like hard peg eventually had to just like dissociate and leave it. It's the same game, Again, like dollar backed by gold and so on. So these CDPs, I think stablecoins will just like follow the same thing. They look great right now. They work for now. They work at the current maybe like size, but I don't think they're like what they claim to be. Basically, they're not as iron-proof as they seem to be.
Thank you, sir. What else do people have they want to talk about or respond to that? Age of the silos. How are things over in the silo? I don't think we can hear you. I don't know if this is a bit or if you have a bad microphone, but if it's a bit, it's hilarious. All right, I think we got to stop this. Thank you, Sage of the Silos. Pinto Pirate, how are you doing? How are things on the high seas?
Oh, it's going well. It's going well. Working on adding some new charts to the UI. Got a bunch of new data to share coming very soon.
Ooh, can you give any of us a hint?
It's a few different things actually, but the basic idea is around just different kind of like where the different capital in the system is going, and that's like as it pertains to like between the silo and the field. Maybe funds are exiting the silo and moving into the field, or vice versa. Data about like converts that can then be in like the big everything chart that can be more closely correlated to the price. So maybe there's like converts happening and then the price is going up, or maybe the price is going up but then there's sewing happening. You can kind of overlay, like you'll be able to overlay like a lot of these data points on top of each other to try to like make more sense of the different price action, or just whatever the current conditions are for each season. So I think that'll be really interesting once all that is available to be overlaid on top of each other, just to put like like all that state into some more context.
Wow, that is beautiful. I remember in a town hall maybe a month or two ago talking about how that was the data that we would need in order to do significantly more sophisticated analysis as to the history of the protocol and its performance so far, and how we can best optimize all of the parameters, the many parameters. So that's very, very exciting. When do you think we'll be able to access it?
Definitely this week. Most of it is done already. I'm just kind of finishing getting everything on the UI, and then trying to organize it in some sensible fashion. I think initially it'll probably just be available on the big everything chart, but I also want to think through like what it might look like to maybe have some kind of like a curated version of it that people can just view on the like as one of the pre-built charts on one of the other pages. But I mean, there's like so many different data points here that it's like I think people will choose how to mix and match what they want to see depending on what they're looking at. But it's definitely like it does become somewhat of an organizational challenge. But that's good. We like having more data.
Yeah, that's a good problem to have. It's very exciting. I find the big chart to be really helpful to try to understand what's going on. And the more data that you put, the more there is to understand. So, I know it can be tedious, and maybe there's not the biggest audience for it always, but I am interested in a public way, just talking about the data and how it is perceived. So once we really get like a real enough, a minimum amount, that's something I think we can start to do. Maybe like a Beanstalk University 201, if you know what I mean. Because this is going to be more complicated. And I don't think it's a replacement for any sort of education or materials for new users. But for advanced users, I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely excited once it's all there and all available to, spend some time myself just kind of looking at all this stuff and seeing what we can learn.
Beautiful. Thank you for your hard work, Pinto Pirate.
You too, sir.
Frio, what's going on in your corner? We can't hear you, Frio.
Hello?
Yo.
Can you hear me? Great.
Yeah.
Just recently wrapped up the audit, which is great. All the upgrades from inception of Pinto to now, as well as changes from Beanstalk to Pinto. I just added an upgrade, or hopefully slated for the next PI, that will update the morning auction to be granular to the block level rather than having these intervals. Just because it felt like an easy upgrade to slot in, and with the new tractor launch, felt like it was more reasonable to add it now. It is the best time to add it. So added that. I would like to investigate more or spend more of my time on the recent tractor behavior in regards to soil. I feel like the current way we measure demand for soil is not sufficient enough given the new tool sets these farmers have, specifically with tractor. I feel like at the moment it measures demand too aggressively, or I guess it's very reactive to season by season change in demand that isn't indicative of the entire state.
What do you think that looks like?
I mean, I feel like it definitely has to, it being the demand or measuring demand, has to incorporate a longer look back. You think of the current look back as just looking back to change demand over 2 seasons. I think one, the demand has to be averaged to some degree over the course of N seasons, and then two,
Do you think raw soil amount? Sorry to cut you off, but do you think raw Pinto sown is the thing that matters, or is it like now that we have this super granular auction, and then we have a flat period after that? Do we want to measure? Instead of measuring it over multiple seasons, what about potentially measuring it still just discretely, like over the previous 2 seasons, but doing it in a much more sophisticated way?
like instead of measuring the past 2 seasons, we measure the past 3 seasons. Is your suggestion?
No. I'm independent of whether to measure it over multiple seasons. I guess, independent of whether to measure it over just the previous 2 seasons, or as we currently do, or over N seasons, if you will. I'm proposing that maybe the way that we should measure the demand for soil, it should factor in the temperature in some way, the effective temperature of the sow, if you know what I'm saying.
Interesting. I mean, I feel like that would be more applicable during the morning auction for sure, but I'm not really sure what that means in regular sowing.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, like how to handle it, which I don't have a great answer for, but I'm just highlighting like that might be something worth exploring in terms of how do we do that most efficiently, if you know what I'm saying. How can we actually, now that we have this really granular user activity within a season, we have all the tools such that they can effectuate those granular activities. I think we do want to increase the sensitivity of the system to capture that and to measure that as best we can. Whereas just like when this original demand for soil was created, it was exclusively around the idea of a flat temp within a season, and we're measuring things just over the previous 2 seasons, right? But now protocol, I guess, is what I mean. Like there was no,
You're cutting
I
off,
guess.
Ben. Sorry. It's hard to hear you.
Hold on. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Hold on. I think I can do a little bit better. What about now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's great.
Where did you lose me?
I lost you when you were when you were justifying the rationale between adding the temperature as a metric of soil.
It's that when the original temperature system was created, there was no Dutch auction. It was just a fixed temp every season, right? And this has nothing to do with how many seasons to measure it over. But within the whole protocol at that point, we really only had single season look back. And it wasn't until we implemented this blight factor where we really have some sort of multi-season look back. I guess you could make an argument with the oracles. We do have multi-season look back, but that's more for manipulation resistance. That's not really for the protocol itself, if you know what I'm saying. And I guess in this case, we are experiencing manipulation on the demand for soil. So it may make sense to implement something similar to the price oracles. But I would still think we want to sort of weight the demand by the temp.
Why is that though? Like if we're measuring if we're getting soil in, why does the temperature have to play into that factor?
Well, it's like if the protocol gets the same amount of Pinto sown, but at a lower temp, that's increasing demand.
Totally. I mean, I don't think we need that granularity now, to be honest. I feel like
I don't know. I think really we're experiencing
right
a lot
now,
of manipulation right now.
yeah, but that's independent of the change in temperature, I think. Like what you just described doesn't really apply here. Like in this era where we're getting so much manipulation, every season the soil increases and the temperature is decreasing. By that metric, demand for soil is still increasing. And it becomes a very complex, like two-dimensional analysis where we have to weigh the magnitude of the increase in soil with the magnitude of change in temperature, which feels like a lot. I mean, I guess you can use pod as a proxy, but that's what it is. It still just feels like a very complex problem to solve, and it's unclear to gains. We're just going from just using soil as the indicator of change in demand.
Well, I'm open to the idea that all we need to add at this point is manipulation resistance. I'm proposing that perhaps we can, with not too much analysis, figure out a way to improve our ability to measure. But maybe not.
Like via the temperature, adding the temperature as another dimension in which we measure it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but like the temperature right now is kind of downstream of the soil demand. Like in all our cases, if demand is increasing, generally speaking, the temperature goes down. Like it's only the edge cases where temperature
Demand is
stays
not
static.
increasing.
Correct. But
So
well,
it's like
like
the
just
system's
like,
misreading.
but you can even say like the temperature is decreasing and the amount of soil demand or amount of soil being sown is the same. Like you can make the argument that demand is increasing by that metric.
Because demand is the same?
Because the amount of pintos being sown every interval, let's call it, is the same, but the temperature is going down.
Totally. It's just a question of like, is that really accurate? Or is it, and it is accurate to some degree, but is it the highest level of fidelity the protocol can measure demand at? Like, I don't think so.
I mean, yeah, I think adding temperature would add so much fidelity. I mean, I'm interested in having it be manipulation resistant before we add more granularity to measuring soil demand at the moment, personally.
I'm just wondering if they're like two birds, one stone.
You're saying adding the other axes would make it more manipulation resistant.
Potentially.
Got it. Yeah, I don't really subscribe to the idea at the moment. I mean, I feel like personally, if we add the temperature dimensionality without perhaps using like with the current implementation of just having a one season look back, I think it doesn't add the amount of manipulation resistance is very marginal. I think it really does need to have a separate multi-season look back, just whatever that really means or how it's implemented for it to become manipulation resistant. But I don't think adding the temperature at the moment, unless I got to think about it more, but I don't think that will add resistance over time.
Yeah, I think we should think a little more about that, but it's very interesting. Very, very interesting. Pintosaurus, what's up in your corner?
Hey guys, I'm a new user here. Thanks for letting me speak for the first time ever.
Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm doing great. Loving the protocol. I feel like I'm coming in here without a lot of context. I'm sorry for being here late. I kind of want to let things run for a little bit more before I
It's the town hall.
chime in, so I can find.
We're just checking in. We're just talking. We're talking about what's on people's minds. Rio is just talking about the changes that they're working on and potential change to how we measure demand for soil for manipulation resistance. We're just going around talking about what's on our mind about the protocol. This is the town hall, so whatever's on your mind, we're interested in what the users have to say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very excited at the prospect of coming up with new ways of explaining the protocol. I'd love to get involved myself, offer my time. Like one of the biggest joys of my life was getting to teach computer science for a while and explain to young students very complicated topics. And at the beginning, I was a very bad teacher. I would get up in front of the class and ramble. I would use so many words, just so many words. I would try to explain everything all at once. And you kind of wanted to, because everything that you were trying to explain about computer science was so complicated. So complicated. But students who are coming from zero, or maybe a little bit more than zero, don't have the bandwidth. And when I look back on those 2 years, I realized it was really just crazy to think that they could take it all in once. So what I had to learn, that was very difficult about being a good teacher, was that you have to lie to your students sometimes, or simplify. But sometimes simplifying, especially when the extent to which you do that is severe, can feel like lying. And it's like this instinctive, terrible, viscerally awful feeling in your gut. You're like, oh, I can't be telling Tommy that it works like this because it's just not true. But the reality is that Tommy, in that moment, that's all that he needs to build his level 1 understanding of the very cool thing to learn about. And when I got comfortable with doing that, and it took a long time to get comfortable with that, I became a much better teacher. And at the end of those 2 years, it was my joy and pleasure to hear from maybe 30% of the students in my AP classes that they were going to go on to college and study computer science. And at that point, they were ready. I've loved Pinto and Beanstalk from the beginning. I've loved all the devs involved with it. But I think it's very, on the one hand, natural to assume that a lot of other people out there in the world think like you, are similar to you. And that's how I think. Sometimes I just assume that someone will react to something the same way that I react to something. And coming from the educationally privileged background that I do, over time, people helped me realize that I really was not average. And I don't mean to say that just to inflate myself. I think everybody involved in this project is not average at all. I think to think that there are many other people out there like us who might also be interested in the project at the same level of complexity that we are. It's really difficult to think that is true at this point. I am I will just restate that I am so interested in working with any and all devs who want my time and want me to work on new ways of explaining. It was very, 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 very complicated and at the moment unpalatable protocol. I'd willingly give my time to do that. It's so painful for me to see people who would, in my head, and I just know it, they would be so interested in using this thing, but they don't because it's so far over their heads. But they could, but they don't. So once again, I am so happy to offer more of my time on top of what I'm already doing to work with anyone who's interested in trying to connect with this much larger, in my head, audience.
Wow. Thank you for that, Pintosaurus. Tremendous feedback. I think for me personally, I feel an obligation to speak accurately. That at points can be to the detriment of making something palatable. I'm very interested in metaphor and analogy as a way to make things clear, while also communicating that this may not be the perfect, complete explanation, if that makes sense. But it should be as close as possible. You want the best analogy or the best metaphor you can think of. And then we can build them on top of each other. So I'm very interested in this, and I'm also very interested in collaborating in this.
Totally. You always want a little asterisk in there being like, hey, you come back in 2 years, it's going to be explained in a different way. Or 2 weeks. But yeah.
Totally. I guess maybe it's not as much like a different way as it is like, you never want people to feel like they were misled when it comes to money,
Totally. Yeah. Obviously, when the project is, not in the classroom, but it's an actual protocol that involves people investing. Yeah, totally. You want to be very clear about what this thing is. But I think there are ways, we can get very, very intricate with, the English language is so beautiful. It offers an infinite variety of expression, and there are, any idea that you want to express, the English language is probably like one of the best languages you can use to do that. And I think we can straddle this. We can come up with some very palatable explanations, but at the same time make the reader aware that they are simplified and that there is still danger involved in putting your money into something that is an experiment. And frankly, I salivate at the prospect of getting to use words to achieve something complicated like that.
Great. Let's chat.
Let's do it.
Captain, what about you? How are things? What are you the captain of, Captain? You're the captain of some sort of bean-related farm, perhaps?
Wannabe captain. Wannabe. Do you have a role?
Wannabe captain? Interested. We need an open source application process, which currently I don't think we have. But we got to figure out how to open this thing up. I hear people chomping at the bit to come work on this thing.
Beautiful.
So, yeah, we got
If
to
you have
figure out how to
an available ship, if you have a free boat, why not?
We not only have ships, Captain, we have state-of-the-art ships. The state-of-the-art. This is 15 years out still, but we got it live on Ethereum L2 base mainnet. And we are, I think there's a crew assembling to embark on a campaign of sorts. So I think we should talk as well, Captain. This is very exciting. Who knew we had new people sprouting up? Sage of the Silos. I don't know if your mic is still busted. If you want to try again.
I hope it's not.
Boom! There he is.
Look at that. It's all back.
Boom. How you doing?
Doing fantastic. Recently got the soil demand chart finished and put live on the site, so it was exciting. Gonna be working on sorting next and try to make that season stable as good as it can possibly be. But yeah, it's been good. I recently moved, so I haven't had as much time to work as I've wanted to, but now I'm all settled and ready to get back into it.
Thank you for that. On my end, I just wanted to talk briefly about how important I feel that the tweaks to the protocol are made with the mind of Pinto in the context of the larger picture. And I found the conversation last week to be a bit troubling in the sense of I think we need to, as a community, realign ourselves on our values and the monetary policy, and particularly I'm referring to like an arbitrary convert penalty of 100% below a certain price in all cases, which was the topic of discussion last week, is an example of a policy that I feel is pretty misaligned with our values or certainly my values. And so I'm interested in coming to, ultimately Pinto is and there is a social consensus here. And I think the way that Pinto as a meme, Pinto as money, Pinto as a medium of exchange, the way that it will proliferate is with much deeper alignment on our values as a community. So I don't think this is necessarily the right forum. The town hall doesn't strike me as the right forum for this. But my intention is to, at some point in the coming weeks or month or two, try to make some sort of presentation about what I feel the values of Pinto as a currency are and should be in an attempt to realign or find alignment. This is a really interesting project and a social experiment just as much as just a raw economics experiment. Even more so, perhaps. I think I would say more so myself. And so going through these iterations, not just on the economic model, but on effectively the governance model, is really interesting. And we have the fork system getting to a point where it feels like it's going to come soon enough that we'll have a new type of governance system in place. But I feel like before that happens, it's really important that we align ourselves with our values as a community. So I just want to highlight, without rehashing what was spoken about, how important I think it is that this is a value-aligned community. And this is why we have a white paper. This is why we try to do everything open source, have everything audited, and communicate transparently about all of the changes and the way things are happening. And we can do much better, no doubt. But from my perspective, that has to be the foundation of a really strong, distributed and decentralized community. So I just want to. I don't have much to say in terms of what we should be doing and what that hierarchy of values is. But I'm committed to work on it. I think my guess is that other people here are also interested in that work. Curious, those of you that are on this call in particular, if you find, I don't know if you can even show hands, maybe, I don't know exactly the best way to do it in Discord. But to the extent people feel like this is an important thing for us to do to really be able to spread the Pinto meme far and wide in an authentic way. Curious if people feel in agreement with that and feel willing to put in the work, or if they feel like that's not really, that's not going to be the difference maker.
I'm definitely in to explore that.
Yeah, I'm in agreement as well.
Okay. The other thing that I think is worth mentioning is the temp decreasing. It's very, very interesting. Like, the temp is decreasing, people are converting, the price is going up, the market's going up. Things generally seem to be in a very positive direction. There's no reason why you would think, given the converts and given the market movement, that the temp shouldn't come down. It's just an interesting thing that, like, for our discussion earlier about the manipulation, it's unclear what's going to play out with the temp. Like, is it just going to keep getting manipulated down? But to some extent, maybe that's how we get the price discovery. Like, we will find out at what temp people are willing to sow, below which they won't sow anymore. Even if it's like small amounts per season, I feel like that's aligned with our current way that we issue soil every season. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out, this like temp discovery, and to see whether the current mechanism we have is good enough generally, which seems to be what Frio is suggesting, versus I'm curious. I wouldn't even say I'm skeptical. I am optimistic that what will happen in practice is that the tractor orders, I guess maybe the issue is, like, for very small amounts, people maybe be incentivized to still manipulate the price downward. Like, for 50 Pinto an hour, you can manipulate the temp downward. That's potentially an attractive attack to launch for a couple weeks, and really manipulate the temp. Now, the worst thing that would happen is it takes a while for the temp to come back up, so the protocol depegs for a little longer. But that's still a vulnerability potentially. So a truly strong and secure system would even be resistant to that type of manipulation. Even if it's not a fatal manipulation, it just stinks that the protocol, the temp can be manipulated so much. And even after the manipulation downward stops, there's the potential for manipulation to prevent it from going up. So right now it's like the protocol is operating in a pretty non-hostile environment generally, but I think we need to be thinking ahead and thinking about from a security perspective. Not, I feel like, God willing, the code is secure at this point, but it's like now we have to make the economic model as manipulation resistant as possible, and at the seams, like particularly measuring demand for soil. It's not very good right now. So that's just something I'm watching, and I'm excited to continue to get more data. I feel like the protocol is growing quite healthily, even if slowly. I feel like slowly but surely. This is all very healthy from where I sit. So that's sort of where I'm sitting. I'm hopeful that this has the potential to be a big summer for our community, but it has to be based on our values. So looking forward to continuing that work with some of you here. All right, everyone. Is there anything else people have on their mind before we wrap it up?
Curious. You said, the protocol is growing slowly but surely. Like, what did you mean by that statement?
Well, I look at the debt issuance as an indicator of that, as an example, where the pod line does continue to grow slowly but surely, and that is a way to value the value of the credit-based system. Then you couple in the fact that the price is going up, the market is going up. So this is all healthy, considering that there's no new demand because there's no real utility right now. It's not so low volatility and there's not any yield. It makes sense that there's no demand. So the protocol has to repeg itself. And I think it's great that the protocol has to repeg itself. I think it's a tremendous opportunity. So that's sort of, for me, it's like the slow, steady march to peg and growth of the pod line is very positive.
Agreed.
What else? Anything else on people's minds? All right. Thank you, everyone. I found this to be very positive. I appreciate everyone contributing. This is going to take a real group effort to get the word out there. I'm very proud of our work here, but we're going to have to do a lot more to spread the information. To Pinto Source's point, currently the language we're using and the way that we are talking about things needs to be improved a lot. So I think over the next couple months, a lot of our effort should be geared towards that, and we move from there. That's my attitude. So thank you, everyone.
I'm hyped to be involved.
Cheers.
Good shit, peeps.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.